Okay, we're gonna go another one onto YouTube today, but this time it's talking more about the politics and regulation for AI in Canada, AI in the States, as well as looking at what other countries are doing with their artificial intelligence journeys. Now, just before anyone starts accusing of, this is all AI generated, yes, you are absolutely right. But we have sources for all of the different key points that we're using for this particular piece. And we're using and this piece was actually inspired by some of the stuff coming out of the Globe and Mail, Global News, with concerns surrounding AI platforms and what that's doing to the perception of content on the internet, but also more importantly the perception of AI for Canadians. So let's get into it. Canada losing AI, Trump versus Carney. That's the thumbnail. Losing big. Canada fell behind in the AI race. No signs of recovery with max fear and red tape regulation. So it's really a tragic tale for Canada. We were once the biggest leader on the AI frontier, and then the moment that ChatGPT became commercialized, we saw uh, the country literally falling to last place amongst developed nations for both adoption and strictly commercialization. So Canada helped build modern AI, but we're losing big right as rivals accelerate. Fear, red tape, and policy limbo are freezing AI adoption, pushing real deployment further out of reach. The recent Canadian press report that inspired this piece is showing that AI generated hate and deepfakes are spreading, while rules and regulations to try and manage this new frontier of technology is lagging behind quite a bit. One watchdog put it bluntly: we have no safety rules at all, no way of holding platforms accountable whatsoever. And this is going to become the new way of things with this technology. There is no way to regulate this stuff because these models are open source. Pretty much anyone with a knack for technology or development can get access to them and start to create content using these models in ways that only they have control over. So it's not so much that we're trying to control what it is that AI is creating or doing, but we want to be able to understand what it's doing so that we can make better decisions. And that's really what our position here is at the agency. Understanding the technology is far more useful than just being afraid of it. So let's see. In Ottawa, the last attempt to tackle online harms died with prorogation. The Justice Minister now promises a fresh look, and a new AI ministry says it's better to get regulation right than it is to rush. Translation for us Canadians is we're going to do more waiting. Risks are going to grow, and ultimately AI procurement is going to stall. So Canada again is taking the position of sit on our hands and wait, and with this new technological frontier, that's the complete opposite of what we want to do. And so we're falling farther and farther behind when it comes to wrangling our AI strategy, regulation, and bottom line commercialization. We're just not doing it. So economically, the leak is obvious. Canada hosts 10% of the top tier AI researchers in the world, yet only 7% of intellectual property comes from pan Canadian AI strategy or is owned by Canadian firms, and just a fraction of that for 2023 2024 funding for AI native startups landed here in Canada. So, like, we have some of the best research in the world, yet we have little to no startups engaging with commercialization. And so, bottom line is, we have a lot of talent here, but we don't capture any value when it comes to AI projects. So, this isn't a choice between safety and speed, it's a sequencing problem. We should be building while we regulate, and, with auditable, compliant use cases, aka the stuff that we're doing, the 24/7 receptionist, booking, intake, follow ups, very straightforward stuff. Very little on the AGI or uh, AI content creation. Like, most of this content is generated by AI, even the images. but most of the workflows we put together are for agents that can do work in operations, answer your phone, follow up with customers, so on and so forth. So AI adoption in Canada, fear and red tape are quite literally choking the growth here. The AI adoption in other countries in developed nations is skyrocketing. Their investment into AI is almost directly correlated to GDP growth. And you can see that in the States, however many dollars they spend on AI, their GDP increases. So Canada's AI debate is dominated by safety headlines and policy limbo. Like all of the news articles that I see around AI in Canada is constantly, risks, fear. We don't know what this does. How do we regulate it? In the States is the complete opposite. $1 billion into AI infrastructure. This AI company just got $1 million in funding. They're throwing money at their technology while we stand and look at it and pretty much don't do anything but become more afraid as time passes. And this is freezing the deployment of projects for Canadians. Frontline advocates call today's environment weaponized for AI tools that create images or even text. These harms aren't artificial; they're real, they say. And meanwhile, officials keep promising a fresh look at online harms rules, but every month there's literally no guidance or any sort of roadmap toward regulation. We're just literally told to wait, just wait, 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 wait. And the problem with that is because the technology is moving so fast, like this is the fastest moving technology in pretty much humanity's existence. The idea of waiting is the risk. So we're risking not acclimating to the technology fast enough, and our economy is not evolving with the technology, and that means we're doing the same things that we've been doing for the last 20, 30 years. In the States, they're 10, 15, 20 years ahead with how their technology operations work, and it's reflected in the value of their economy. So on the ground floor, we've got a lot of legal uncertainty. Teams can't tell what's allowed, so pilots stay stalled. And I can tell you right now, there's literally zero AI regulations in existence right now, except for one in the States that touches on to robocalling. You can't call a whole bunch of people using AI voice if they haven't consented to getting those calls. And the reason why that was brought about was because there were some teams during the Trump Biden election that were calling Biden supporters, pretending they were having an AI pretend it was Biden, telling them Biden supporters to vote for Trump. And that was what triggered the only AI regulation in North America. Aside from that, there are zero regulations for AI. So this legal uncertainty is procurement teams looking at a landscape where there's nothing there and just not doing anything because they don't have a regulation to follow. Meanwhile, in the States, there is no regulation to follow, so their AI economy is exploding. So it's definitely a contrast of sentiment when it comes to regulation, and our ability to adopt it with firm guardrails that we know and understand. Here in Canada, we're just literally not doing anything. In the States, they don't see any guardrails, so they're doing everything as fast as possible. And I would say that is economically more effective because of how much value AI can create in such a short amount of time. So we're suffering from uh, a couple things. I would say procurement paralysis is the big one. We see this with pretty much every single team trying to implement in Canada. Uh, Buyers fear headlines more than they fear poor performance. Like we would rather not do anything and avoid any sort of negative press, so to speak, than have AI improve our operations. In the States, they have everyone's using it, everyone's doing it, and so there were a few poor headlines when this started, but now the main headlines are growth, 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 economy, economy, economy. So getting past that fear is a huge hurdle for us in this country, and we like to point out the bad things that AI does rather than the good things that it can do in Canada. So a lot of the press and media, they put up fear-filled headlines, looking at hateful deepfakes, and a lot of the video creation platforms like Google Veo or some of the other uh, language models that are being used are coming up with like racist content or hateful content, and that's really just a small sliver of everything that AI does. So for us to focus on such a small part of the AI mural, so to speak, means it really does feel like Canada's just focusing on the bad things and not what good the technology can do, and that's slowing us down. So the paradox is we over-index on fear at the expense of productivity. So in this country, we choose to be afraid rather than to be productive, and it is now the AI is really accessible to anyone now. Like you can even build your own models if you spent some time learning or even spent some time talking to AI to learn how to do it. You could start to put together your own models for content creation. And this, because it's available to everyone and people can create convincing video, it raises public anxiety for those who fall into that fear trap. But the bad thing is that as we continue to fall into that fear trap, Canada bleeds time, talent, momentum, and businesses keep paying the costs of missed opportunity because they aren't adapting with new technology. So AI regulation in Canada, online harm act, policy limbo and deployment. Canada's rules are stuck in between urgency and hesitation. Like we are, and I personally believe that regulators are a little bit afraid to put any sort of laws in place because what is happening internationally in Europe, I think they were trying to regulate AI, and in doing so, they literally regulated their AI industry into submission. So because regulations were in the pipeline or coming down um, or were down the road, companies opted not to build in some places just because there was a fear of, hey, if we build here and then something gets regulated, and then our project stalls or is completely moot. And so the states, they have a different perspective on that. They would rather just let the market take hold and then regulate as needed. And right now they haven't had to make any sort of decisions on regulating AI. The only type of regulation that they've had is the opposite, where if you're engaging in any sort of DEI practices in your AI models or AI projects, you won't get funding. So they're taking the opposite tack, and it's really pushing the frontier for adoption and growth in the country. So bills meant to tackle harmful online content and set a regulatory AI framework died when Parliament was prorogued in January. So we can't even get that far into looking at a regulatory AI framework because the decision makers in a Parliament didn't get anything over the line. In June, the Justice Minister said Ottawa will take a fresh look at the Online Arms Act, while the new AI minister argued it's better to do regulation right than to move too quickly. This is wrong. I mean, history is literally showing us that this type of positioning is wrong because our GDP is careening off a cliff. Those countries who are adopting AI, they're really doing well. So for us to want to regulate right when there's right now nothing to really regulate, it's showing that we'd rather stall than move forward. Um, and some of the harms are real. If people are susceptible to online content, spend 5-10 hours scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, their minds are going to be trained on the type of content they see, the types of algorithms they're engaged with. And advocates report AI generated hate is spreading across platforms, with LGBTQ, Jewish, Muslim, and other communities being targeted by some of this hateful content. One watchdog warned we have no safety rules at all, no way of holding platforms accountable whatsoever. And that's going to be the case forever. Just like, you know, I mean, for anyone to try and regulate the internet, that's a daunting task. I always say, the internet always wins in the end. You try to regulate one person, 100 people will come into play and replace them. So it's really about training us to understand what is real and what was AI generated and the intention of the content that we're looking at. That's going to be the best way to protect ourselves instead of um, punishing people for throwing a punch or a kick at you, learn some self-defense so you can be more sturdy or more aware of the types of content that's being created. Let me see what else here. Policy limbo again. The policy limbo part is the real cost for the country. While we're sitting here trying to figure out policy, the procurement teams they suffer the most because they can't figure out what's allowed and what's not allowed, and so launches get stalled for a long time. Public buyers fear headlines more than miss KPIs. Again, freezing AI adoption. So we'd rather do nothing than try something and see what happens. Again, in the States, they have the opposite sentiment. Founders seek clear regimes abroad, taking compute capital and IP with them. So this is the brain drain part. We talked about this a couple pieces ago, where anyone with any sort of technological competence or you know who is an AI enthusiast, they're looking at our marketplace, seeing our regulators just wait, and they're saying, you know what, instead of just waiting, let's just go to the countries that are exploding with AI and opportunity and get stuff done there. And it's a real shame because AI sort of started in this country, but is leaving because we're just not doing anything. So the fix isn't safety or speed; it's safety and speed in parallel. Canada needs enforced takedowns of platform duties while giving compliant builders a fast lane. This, I mean, I sort of agree with this. This is, AI generated content for the type of direction that I wanted this piece to go into. But the safety part is less important than the speed part, because the more actions you take, the more decisions you make, the more you're going to be able to determine the types of regulations you need in place. So the harmful effects of deep fakes and AI generated content it will always be there, but it's the same way that any sort of content can lead to harmful effects or training a population. Like propaganda is basically just the same thing. We're creating content to promote a certain sentiment or encourage a way of thinking. AI can just do it, but a lot faster. So we pretty much want to arm ourselves with understanding, this was made to make me feel a certain way. Should I accept it or should I ignore it? Again, the deep fakes, I mean, they're happening a lot in Canada, but there's a lot more deep fakes in the United States. So AI video now is very, very cheap. All these pictures, all this text generated by AI video, same thing. We can animate this picture, for example. It's fast and it's viral. It fuels outrage and copycats. And a lot of these people who are creating this content know that these types of things generate a lot of clicks. So when a deep fake comes up, or maybe something that's a little bit racist or provocative that was AI generated, the people who are making this content know that Instagram is not going to take it down, because Instagram or TikTok doesn't really care. They're in the business of views, clicks, engagement. So I would even say some of these platforms welcome this content because of how much engagement it gets and how many people it brings to the platform. And some groups and communities specifically are targeted. But again, these are the same. It's the same thing with non AI targeting. It's just being it's just targeting through a different channel. So really we want to just arm ourselves with understanding what type of content there is, and educating the population, like, hey, this looks like it might be AI generated. Choose to ignore it. Don't feel anything from it. And again, this incentivized because platforms gain on outrage. Engagement's not equal to truth, but again, the spiciest clips travel the farthest. And executives for companies, they just see risk, and not the ROI that comes from AI. And this is the big hang up in Canada, where decision makers are opting for no AI because they see a deep fake and they think, well, I don't like AI because I saw a deep fake video, but that has nothing to do with your internal operations or maybe your customer engagement. It's simply a different part of the huge mural that is AI technology. So what Canada needs to do next without freezing adoption is, I mean, to try and regulate, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and punish them for allowing people to post content. Like we're getting into the area where it's, the freedom to post, the freedom to say what you want. You don't really want to infringe on stuff like that. You want to educate people so that they can make better decisions. Um, and of course, those platforms themselves have a responsibility to make sure that the content that's being shared has some semblance of safety and civility. So maybe, coming to an agreement on regulation with those platforms that do share the content, that would be a good place to start. But outright not using AI because of, a caveman video you saw on Instagram is probably not the best idea. uh, Business owners, this is for you. What you guys can do now to deploy safe and auditable, but most importantly productive AI operations, is the voice AI receptionist. Like, we try and reach out to a lot of Canadian businesses, and the one thing that we notice is literally no one's answering the phone for a lot of them. So I can only imagine how many Canadian businesses are missing out on revenue just because they don't have the staff required to manage, that engagement, or the top funnel engagement, or regular day to day intake. I remember personally, trying to have an ear checkup or something like that, and I had to call a few different doctors in the area, and it was, I think, the third office that had a receptionist working at the time. She answered my call and booked me onto the calendar. The first two had no answers. One of them actually called me back later that day and asked, if I wanted to get a booking on the calendar, and I said no, I was already booked, and I could sense the disappointment in that person's voice, because it was really just a matter of being able to answer the phone that captured the business for who I booked with, and I ended up getting service and treatment from them. So that shortlisting process that we do when we're calling service providers, it's really important that someone is there to answer the phone. And so this is a very low hanging fruit use case that we encourage Canadian businesses to start with, because it's just amazing how much business is being missed by people just not answering the phone. That's the bottom line. And of course, a lot of what we do is put in guardrails into our the models that we deploy, so businesses don't have to worry about the AI agent saying something that might be outside of their brand or culture. We work a lot on that with our clients to make sure it aligns with exactly what it is that the business owner is looking for. And this is something that, most people don't understand. It's that the AI is not in complete control. You can really train them to do exactly what you want. And of course, if you want an incident playbook, you can. But again, preparation and for your deployment for your model is a lot of the work that we do. Readjustments afterwards are very minor. You don't want to deploy something that isn't meaningful or hasn't been tested. It's a lot easier to make small changes than it is to sort of overhaul your entire AI framework after the fact. And this one's going to be the real a pain and stickler for Canadians. It's AI productivity, Canada and Canadian economy, the cost of waiting. So our productivity in this country is collapsing, and you can see in other countries it's increasing. They're, constantly adopting new technology. The technology spend for Canadians is markedly lower than other nations. And so, but the bottom line is productivity is paychecks. Every month Canadians hesitate on AI. We trade higher wages for less output. Like, Canadians tend to want more in terms of salary to meet our growing cost of living, which is, you know it's a product of our real estate economy. But we're not really outputting more for the salaries and wages that we're getting, and that's because we're not leveraging technology to do more work. So we're not risking falling further behind. We are falling further behind economies that are shipping workflows and automations faster, and that they're not stalling. And these losses compound daily. I mean, again, we take the very basic example of missed phone calls. For a business to be missing phone calls is a business to be missing revenue. And another thing is, we noticed a lot of the clinics that we reached out to early in the summer for the healthcare campaign. Some of them you'd call, and get no one answering, you don't leave a voicemail, and they don't even call you back. So it's, healthcare is supposed to be a powerful industry in this country, but the amount of slippage that goes on with just basic customer engagement is phenomenal. So I can imagine the frustration of those patients that are looking for, help, or trying to feel better when they're in pain, maybe at night or early in the morning. There might not be anyone around. It's far better for someone who's in pain to at least have a conversation with an AI to let them know, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Can you get this information to a doctor? The AI can do that. Leaving a voicemail on a random machine and a random phone number, hoping that someone hears it, that's not very effective. So value capture for technology for operations is drifting abroad. Canada trains world-class researchers. Um, like we are great at creating great minds, but as soon as those great minds realize how great they are and how not great the economy is in Canada, they just leave. So we're exporting some of the top talent in the tech space to countries like the United States because there's just far more opportunity. And compute slows the clock, scarce, expensive GPU access, and unpredictable queues stretch build cycles. Like, we don't have a data center infrastructure here to host our own language models. So a lot of, especially the systems we use, we are importing from the States. They have, you know, NVIDIA powering most of the data centers across the United States and more. They're expected to spend trillions of dollars in the next 5 to 10 years on AI systems. And so for this agency, we sort of want to rely on the best of the best to put together some of these models for our clients. We're not going to wait for Canada to try and meet that same threshold of investment. Like, trillions of dollars, just, it sounds, unbelievable, but that's really the amount of money that's being put into AI in the States. In Canada, we can't even get a couple billion off the ground from Justin Trudeau. A few years ago, he was trying to give $2.5 billion to Canadian businesses to start AI, and that it feels like that was dead in the water. Nothing came of it. So it's really important that we understand the scale and degree to which the rest of the world is capturing value in this technology, and for us to sit here and be afraid of AI generated caveman videos and have those as our headlines in the news, it's not helping with adoption. Procurement delay kills ROI. I can personally tell you that the teams that deploy faster and more meaningful builds, they see results faster. It's the bottom line. If you sit there and wait and try and make sure your compliance documents are perfect and you never deploy, you're missing out on opportunities. So the cost of waiting is bigger than any sort of headline risk. I would even say putting together AI aversive headlines is a risk to our adoption. So some of these news and media outlets are not doing Canadians a favor by making them more afraid of AI. They should be encouraging safe AI adoption. Canada versus US, and then Canada versus China, while we're falling behind. This isn't just that Canada's slow with it. The customers globally are gravitating to other places. So we might have started with great ideas about AI in this country maybe 15, 20 years ago. But when it comes to commercialization, which is the most important part, most companies and clients, they gravitate towards those who are already established or already making those huge strides in investment, like infrastructure. And that's generally happening in the States and China. So teams will want to go to places where products ship faster, and you can recycle your wins on those AIs in or AI workflows into more wins, and that knock-on effect and that momentum generally creates a lot of value. Again, we train excellent researchers, but too much intellectual property and scaling happens abroad, so they just leave. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these researchers would have been the ones putting together these great AI tools or AI products, or putting together teams to get funding for data and infrastructure, or data centers and infrastructure rather. So it's, it is a tragic story for Canada's AI. I wouldn't even say adoption. I feel like AI was sort of born in this country and took off elsewhere. Another big thing that we noticed with a lot of, especially the municipalities that we were speaking to, is the need, or I would even say it's more of a desire for something called data sovereignty or data residency. And there's a big misconception about that in Canada. Just because data is being stored in the country, through AWS, Google, or Microsoft, doesn't mean it's necessarily sovereign to the crown. I mean, if you're hosting your data on a Google server in Toronto, Google still has control over that data. So you're not really as sovereign as you might want to believe. Another thing is there are no regulations that require data residency for most um, operations in Canada. There are some municipalities that must have it, and those are really outdated regulations. But like transit commissions, medical data, all of those things are encouraged to be stored within Canada. But it's literally in the regulation, it'll say, but if this is not feasible, then we would want to see best efforts towards end-to-end encryption, security, privacy, confidentiality. So the idea that we would want to keep towards being sovereign with our data, but not having a proper infrastructure to house it safely is sort of ironic, and that needs to be clarified with you know decision makers letting Canadians know, hey, you can share your data with Google or share your data with Microsoft safely because they have really strong systems. You're going to be okay with your data residency being held in Europe or United States. Let's see what else here. We go into more depth with what we would advise some teams who are looking at procurement to do when it comes to data storage. And it's just basically you want to meet a certain threshold of encryption, and then pretty much you're safe. Not even the people who develop the platforms can see your data on their own platform if the role-based access control end-to-end encryption is employed. They would need your permission to get access to your data, which to me is you're sovereign over your own data. What we got here else? AI policy, Canada and Canadian tech policy rules, and Runway, not either or. So we keep defaulting to regulate first, deploy later, and this is freezing our AI adoption in place. So because there's no rules yet, people are sort of waiting for rules before they make a decision on AI. But regulators can't make any rules unless they see something that they don't like or something that they think might be a risk. But because no one's been engaging with the technology, because there are no rules, we're sort of at a chicken and the egg paradox where too afraid to use it because there's no rules, and there's no rules because no one's using it. So we're really frozen in place. In the States, they lift up all the rules and say, hey, use AI as much as possible, because they can literally see a direct correlation between their GDP and AI investments. So they just think the more that we use this technology, the more we spend on it, the more productive we are in this country, and the more opportunities we can create for further production. And AI commercialization in Canada, I think we might be beyond this now. Like in the AI space, this development moves so quickly where in the last 2 years, if we haven't made the necessary steps to invest in infrastructure or have research teams position themselves in a way that other people would want to invest into them to build infrastructure, it's sort of too late. And this is again pointing back to the tragedy. Like, we started with some of the best AI minds and researchers in the world in this country. Like, that's Canada's a great place for people. We produce some of the greatest minds in the world, except we just don't do anything after that. They leave to another country where there's more opportunity, um, most of the time, and so we're sort of stuck in this this sinkhole of, we're producing great minds, great education, and then as soon as those people realize, hey, there's no opportunity here, they just leave. Um, Now this is some of the things that we put together for tips on adopting AI in your operations. If you are a Canadian business and you're like, hey, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm lost. First thing you want to do is come up with a plan or a roadmap for deployment. Before you even think of a use case, try to think of a plan where you can get things out the door firmly without the discouragement of fear or the emotions that come with seeing a headline on global news or the Globe and Mail about AI. Just make a plan that you stick to. And the first part of the plan, you're going to want to iron out, impact assessments, privacy impact assessments, is namely, the one that everyone's concerned with. Where's my data going to go? End-to-end encryption is your best friend. Role-based access controls are really, really powerful. Using platforms that literally promise encryption, like OpenAI. Some of the subscriptions you use, if you're not using the free one, all of your data is safe. They literally have that in their contracts or their agreements with you. And so making sure all the safety stuff is covered first and foremost, and then you want to try and figure out, okay, what's a great use case for AI for our team. First place I would always advise Canadians, just get a receptionist, get someone to answer your phone. We're so busy. I made another piece on the Canada's busy trap. We're so busy with mundane administration that we don't even have time to figure out how to become unbusy. So the first thing that you would want to do is build an agent that can help you become more efficient and less busy. And receptionists are a great place to start because they work 24/7. They're most of the time smarter than my receptionist outperforms me on the phone all the time. Like I am not the best at speaking on the phone, but Sasha, if you were to call her, she could explain exactly what this company does, to the letter, far better than I could. Um, and obviously, you want to test. Testing is super important. So, pilots for a certain amount of your operation, not the whole operation at once. For example, the clinics that we work with, we advise deploying agents during after hours when there's quite literally no one available. What sort of loose balls can you catch after hours? What sort of situations can you get involved in where you can actually help people who might be in pain after hours but don't have anyone to talk to? It's interesting because the most engaged conversation with AI in 2023 was, AI, please help me make some ideas for business or my hobbies or what have you. People wanted ideas. In 2025, the most common topic of conversation with AI is therapy. So we're seeing a lot of people go towards these machines just to get connection, with something that can respond back to them while they're in pain. So for our medical clinics that we work with, we just want to make sure there's something there that can help people while they're in that moment of pain. They feel like no one's listening to them or they're lost, and they'll be able to have a meaningful conversation with an AI agent. That AI agent will take that conversation and send it directly to the doctor in real time. So there's no wait. You don't have to wait for a voicemail or anything like that. And of course, after you've gone through your pilot, measure the effects of it. And what we're seeing is that once people go through their pilot, they see an immediate ROI. Like it's so obvious. Like once you start, it's so clear and obvious that this technology is better than doing nothing. That teams tend to want to scale up afterward. And then, of course, you want to look at your monthly KPIs to make sure you're improving in the models that you're using and adjusting them as you go along. And one thing that we do advise is data minimization for AI agents, like only give them the minimum data that they need to do work meaningfully. And you can advise people that are interacting with the systems to do so. So in Canada, especially for healthcare information, we're always doing data minimization so that only the doctors or practitioners are really understanding and getting that information, and only a minimal amount is going through a large language model for any sort of AI decision making layer um, before it gets to the doctor. Let me see what else here. So public sector, it's a whole different ball game for Canadians. I don't see. I'm starting to see RFIs come up on the portals for basic information on what an AI infrastructure could look like in their organization. But we're so far behind that we're just still doing RFIs, um, and this to me is just because of a lack of understanding of use cases at a granular level within an organization. But with AI, because it's so fluid as a technology, the use cases are infinite. So for me to see, these large corporations do RFIs, $300,000, $500,000 just to get information, you could really build an RFI from the perspective of an AI agency through ChatGPT. If you were a procurement team, like, you can tell ChatGPT, hey, pretend I'm an AI agency and I'm approaching an RFI for this organization, your own organization. What are some of the potential use cases that you could come up with for this organization that would benefit them the most or have the fastest ROI? Like that is it's and you can do that with ChatGPT. Another thing that we advise is capability heat mapping, where you ask the AI to build out a heat map that cross references the technology currently available with the different areas of operation in your organization to see where AI is matured enough to be useful, and it's pretty much everywhere now. So, and if you're a procurement team and you're seeing this and you need help, just fiddling with ChatGPT to come up with some of these ideas, no problem. Book a discovery call with us. We build proof of concepts, use cases for um, procurement teams all the time, just to show them how they work. And after they work, they're like, okay, well, what else can the AI do? That's really what we're looking for. And of course, you want outcome based scopes of work. So we're huge on deliverables because a lot of people don't know really what AI is or how it can work for them. A lot of our languaging is strictly deliverables. We're going to give you this, we're going to give you this, it's going to do this, it's going to cost this much, not lofty or sophisticated or abstract ideas on technology. That doesn't work with people. You got to show them quite literally what it is that they're paying for. And so the bottom line for Canadians is that we're losing big on the AI frontier. A lot of it's fear based. Like, don't be afraid to pick up new things, try new things. Historically, in the last 30 years, we've been profoundly underinvested in technology, and this has led to a huge gap for us to leap over to get into the world of AI. So, we got a lot of catching up to do because of that. But at the same time, I really feel like younger people or people that have seen that things are not going to change unless they be the change themselves. Like, we have um, clinics, or even a hospital came into our meeting room one day just because they are still doing very very old school way of communicating with their patients, and it was becoming inefficient to the point where it was costly. It was costing them money to continue in that way. And so I think their decision makers, had that moment of reckoning where they said, you know what, we can be afraid of this as for as long as we want, but unless we change, we're not going to have any more money to operate. It's either we change and do something that's a little scary and really cost effective, or we stay the same and watch our ability to operate in this way melt away over time. So be courageous, obviously be mindful, but don't be afraid. Just walk forward into that unknown space. If you need some hand holding, you can book a discovery call with our team. We'll literally do everything for you, from capability heat mapping, use case ideation, showing you exactly what tools and API integrations would be needed to materialize that ideal workflow that you're thinking about. I always tell my clients, whatever you can think of, we can build. If you have an idea in your brain that you could say to yourself, it'd be perfect if our operation worked like that, we can build that with the technology that's available now. So don't treat this as a scary environment. Treat this as an opportunity to change the way you've been doing things, and obviously keep safety top of mind. But keep productivity and economics of your operation top of mind as well, because once we always notice this with our clients is as soon as they see the actual productivity and value and the ROI, those thoughts of fear, they just melt away immediately. So, and that for us is super important, because it just goes to show when you're winning, you're far less afraid. And I think that's, pointing back to Canadians a little more. We're having a tough time in the economy right now, so everyone's defaulting to fear. But those who are willing to be courageous really see the benefits. So if you guys want to see some of the sources we use for this article, it's all here. Literally all done by AI. Everything here is AI driven. All the sourcing, all the languaging, all the images, and in the time it would have taken the team to put this together, maybe 5 years ago, this was done in a couple hours. So just to give you an idea on the productivity. But that's it. Look forward to the next one.